More than 600 French troops are arriving in the Central African Republic today as part of a UN-sanctioned military intervention to stabilize the conflict-torn nation. Now, the operation follows a day of bloody ethnic violence in the CAR's capital, in which more than 280 people were reportedly killed. Many of those, by the way, appear to have been women and children. The U.S. is pledging $40 million in aid, but American officials insist that at this point, U.S. military assistance is off the table, not an option. Joining me for Q&A to give us the latest is Gillian Turner, who served in the White House National Security Council and currently works at a national security strategy firm where her regional focus is Africa. Gillian, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
If you could first just give us an update on what's happening right now on the ground. We know that there's been coverage of, there's even a lot of photographs of this most recent massacre. What's happening in the capital and around the capital of the Central African Republic with all this sectarian violence and bloodletting?
The nightmare that we talked about inside the Central African Republic last week has actually gotten worse in recent days. What we're seeing now is that supporters of the ousted Christian president, former President Bozize, are rising up in opposition to the seated president, Jotoja, and his Salika henchmen in and around Bangui, the country's capital. The biggest development, perhaps this week, is that hundreds more people have been left dead. We've heard reports coming in yesterday and today about people literally dying in the streets in and around Bangui. Anything from pregnant women being disemboweled and young children being hacked to death with machetes. So what's becoming obvious is that the sectarian divide inside of this country is really only growing deeper.
Clearly already having some echoes of Rwanda when you talk about that level of violence and people using machetes. Gillian, there's this force now of French troops that's arrived. The African Union says that they're sending even more troops in. Does it look like that may be able to calm the situation, or is that just going to essentially push the violence perhaps out of Bangui, the capital, into some of the outlying regions? I mean, this is a bloody sectarian Muslim on Christian fight. A few hundred troops may be able to calm things down a bit, but I mean, the president was telling people, don't worry, everything's fine, while rebels were looting and pillaging his home, as I understand it. So this is going to take more than just a couple weeks of peacekeepers to calm down, won't it?
Indeed. What's happening is that the UN met yesterday and passed unanimously a resolution whereby approximately 1,000 more AU peacekeeping forces are going to be sent in to bring their total on the ground from about 2,500 to about 3,500, which is a considerable number, as well as to augment the French presence on the ground. About 400 troops are going to be increased to about 1,400 over the coming weeks. Another very important decision coming out of the UN was the decision to levy an arms embargo against the country in hopes of helping to kind of dispel the spread of weapons around amongst civilians. So what we have to wait and see now is how effective this level is once we reach capacity and monitor the situation before deciding how to move forward.
Gillian, one last question for you. Samantha Power, a career Africanist, as we used to say in the IC, in the intelligence community, somebody who studies and works on Africa. Samantha Power, Susan Rice, some very senior Obama administration officials have had their professional focus on Africa going back for decades. Is this a moment perhaps of focus? Is this a moment that brings it all together where the Obama administration will do more than just send $40 million in aid? They'll at least work through international partners, through the UN, to try to stop this violence? Or is this going to be back burner for an administration that has a lot of domestic issues?
You know, to answer that question, I think that a positive thing to come out of the events this week is that the international community, the U.S. administration included, Samantha Power, as you mentioned, has really come out of the woodwork, so to speak, on this issue. Whereas last week we were saying, where is the UN, where is the Obama administration? We now know they've really stepped up to the plate in terms of supporting the UN's resolution and providing more and more funding, as we've seen yesterday and today. And as recently as yesterday, I believe Samantha Power released her first statement on the issue in 2 months, as well as the State Department. Secretary Kerry released a statement, and they released another one on their website. So what we're seeing is the U.S. administration really starting to speak out on this issue, and we hope that this momentum continues into the future.
Let's hope it doesn't turn into a full-blown genocide. Gillian, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Buck.
There's good economic news today, but through no fault of anyone in Washington, I guess. Tara is going to explain when we come back.